We now move to the next session. I'm very pleased and honored to invite Dr. Eric Miller. Deepaji, would you like to kindly introduce him?
Namaste and welcome, Dr. Eric Miller. Am I audible? Right, yeah. So I'm once again, very glad to have another stalwart who's doing amazing work in the field of storytelling and growing it in different ways. We have Dr. Eric Miller, who's a PhD in folklore, MSc in psychology, director, World Storytelling Institute, and director, Chennai Storytelling Festival, co-facilitator, Indian Storytelling Network. Dr. Eric Miller is a native New Yorker transplanted to Chennai. He gives training in story composition, storytelling, and storytelling for coaching and counseling. He is going to be sharing with us some stories related to the environment from Tamil Nadu and also a little bit about his journey on storytelling. Over to you, Dr. Eric Miller.
Thank you very much. So two stories relating to nature in Tamil Nadu. I'm going to tell the two stories, but I feel it's important to give context also, to give context to the whole event and discussion. Believe it or not, 20 years ago, when I did my field work, and after my field work, I organized some video conferences between India and my university in Pennsylvania. I was told by some senior professors I would be ruining the culture of the local people who happened to be tribal people who were visiting Chennai. They told me I would be ruining the culture of the local people if I got them involved in video conferencing. Can you imagine? That was the thinking 20 years ago, that we would be ruining them if we exposed them to high technology. Now, of course, people everywhere, as long as they have a signal, they are doing Zoom or the equivalent. But I apologize. I'm going to tell a story from the Kani Kadempatum community, but I don't have a Kani person here as a partner for him or her to tell it, or for him or her to critique my telling of it. In a conference like this, the more we can have participation by the actual indigenous people, the better. But there are logistical challenges even now. Even though people might have cell phones, they might not have a signal, they might not have electricity that day. But I think this is a goal that we should work towards, of enabling people in communities to be able to speak really for themselves, including by video conference. Because, we're hoping this pandemic is going to end at some point, right? But it may be some time, and even after the pandemic ends, there may be something, a form of green tourism, where you'll be able to visit with people in communities by video conference. It's conceivable. So with storytelling, and I use the literal term there, storytelling, the literal form of storytelling means using primarily voice and body. And that is a very challenging thing to share with people outside the community, because storytelling is always done in a local dialect or local language. So it's easier if you have a visual craft that you can refer to, because a visual is a universal language, just like dance is a universal language. Even music is a universal language. But if we're limited to the spoken word and facial expressions, that's not really enough. So there has to be some sort of translation, which we can do. But it's again, it's a logistical challenges. One thing I do is take people to locations before the pandemic and engage with members of local communities, so that we hire members of local communities to give us instruction in storytelling. Not just listening to them, but hiring them to teach us how they tell stories. And of course, translation is often needed. One form of local storytelling here in Tamil Nadu and probably around India. In Tamil Nadu, it's called Kadempatum, story and song, where the narrator sometimes is singing, sometimes is talking. And I facilitated events where we had a team of people visiting different, sea fishing communities, agricultural communities, tribal communities in the mountains. And in each case, we studied with them. So that's one solution. In ancient Tamil culture, there were 5 geological cultural zones, starting with the seashore and ending with the mountains. And the 2 stories I'm going to tell you today are from those 2 places, the seashore and the mountains. Each in classical, traditional Tamil culture, each the poetry, the music, the mood of each location was different. And actually it matches the stories that I'm going to tell today. In the traditional Tamil formulation, the mountains are a place of fertility and joyful union, especially between the husband and wife. Whereas at the seashore, there's a lot of tension. In the old days, the man would be going out in ships, and the wife would be worried, is he going to come back on time? Is he going to be okay? Forgive me for the sexist formulation. Today, the men will be worrying if their women are coming back on time. Okay, let me begin with the story that is told by the Kadempatum people. And I did my fieldwork PhD with that community, and I collected this folktale. I heard it from the mother of my research partner, and this is how it works. There'll be a young person in the community who speaks some English and is interested in talking to outsiders, and maybe is interested in Tamil cinema music, 1 foot in the traditional community, 1 foot out. So as a researcher, as an ethnographer, you tend to make contact with that kind of person, and that kind of person then is the go-between between you and the senior people. So the mother of my research partner told this story. Vel Murugan was my research partner, and Vel Murugan's mother told this story. Okay, now I'm leaving analytical mode and I'm going into storytelling mode. There were 7 brothers, and the 6 older brothers said to their younger brother, come on, let's go into the forest and let's hunt for wild pigs. We have our spears, let's go and hunt for the wild pigs. So the younger brother said, okay, let's go. They went deep into the forest, and at a certain point, the 6 older brothers turned on their younger brother and stabbed him to death with the spears that were meant for the pigs. The story doesn't tell us exactly why they did it, just human treachery. So the younger brother had 2 dogs who came with them. And those 2 dogs now went running back to the village and went to the wife of the younger brother, and those 2 dogs communicated to her, come on, come on. So the wife went with the 2 dogs and came to where her husband was lying on the ground. And of course, she began, she got on her knees and was weeping. She was screaming. Oh, it's called opari in Tamil Nadu, mourning. But nearby, there was a snake and a mongoose. Now, usually snakes and mongoose are fighting. They're natural enemies. The mongoose is attacking the snake. But in this case, they were playing. Viliadu, 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 as Vel Murugan's mother used to say. Viliadu is play. Viliadu, 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 Viliadu. They were running around together. And when they heard the wife screaming, They came up and the snake said, don't worry, madam, we understand the situation. We will get the medicine. We will revive your husband. And sure enough, the snake and the mongoose went and found some plant medicine, prepared it, put it on his wounds, and he revived. And so the younger brother, the wife, the two dogs, they went back to the village. They told the Panchayat leaders what happened. And the 6 older brothers were forced into exile. They had to leave the village, which was the most serious punishment in those days. Now, I don't see a single image of a moving person. Could somebody turn on their camera just so good, thank you. That's, yes, yeah, thank you. Can you give a little feedback about that story or the way I told it? Just any little response.
I think what I liked about the story was when you mentioned that they used the spears intended for the wild boar for the younger son, and then you talked about the treachery and you said it was human nature. So it moved from the concrete to the abstract. So that was really interesting.
Thank you. You know, I didn't discuss it with anybody, but I have a feeling that the 6 older brothers would have inherited the property of the younger brother, and that might have included his wife. I'm not sure about the details of it, but that's the only reason I can think of why the older brothers did that. It's hard to discuss these kind of details with people in a community, because the people in a community with these stories, they're not really used to being analytical about it. All right, so I include that story as an example of joyful union because the recovery is made and husband and wife are reunited, but of course the 6 older brothers are not included in that union. I did this field work in that area in 2003 and 2004, which was 18 years ago. And I visited periodically. I've stayed in touch with some people. And I noticed a couple years ago, there's a big, new, beautiful building, a sort of museum near the village. But this was right as the pandemic was starting. So I'm sure it hasn't been used, but I was so delighted to see that a museum in honor of the Kani people has been built there. I like to think that my field work, you know, which was publicized a little bit in local papers, might have stimulated it to some degree. But if they do go ahead with this museum, I hope they have live storytelling sessions and events where people can meet. But you see, tourists are often in a much higher social economic class than the artisans. So there's a little bit of tension there because some upper class people may not feel comfortable interacting. They may respect tribal knowledge or traditional knowledge, but they may not actually be interested in being around actual tribal people. But others are. So this is really a niche form of tourism. Where you learn the language, you learn the storytelling, and you actually meet people. Okay.
Dr. Miller.
Yes.
You said they don't like analytical discussion about their stories. Did you try to collect some folk exegesis, metafolklore from within the community? Metafolklore I borrow from Alan Dundas.
You know, my language ability, the people were speaking a mix of Tamil and Malayalam, speaking a tribal dialect, and my language ability was so poor, I really couldn't, that was probably the main problem. that my language ability was just not up to it. And in fact, I had to change my subject for my PhD. I started out wanting to study grandmother stories, but I ended up studying children's songs and games. Which there's a long history actually of studying children's songs and games in the field of folklore, and it's a good entry into a culture. But that's what I did. I collected a bunch of songs and games, and you can see the recordings. To follow up on any of this, please send me an email. You can Google World Storytelling Institute, and you'll find my email ID and a website.
I just did that. I just went to the website.
Great.
I compare field works, particularly of anthropological nature, ethnographic nature, to puzzle piece collection. And these puzzle pieces are available to you just like that. You don't go for them. They come to you when you stay longer, when you spend longer periods with the community. These puzzle pieces come to you, and you solve the puzzle at the end of a long stay in that area. A conscious, deliberate questioning, a conscious inquiry may not be very helpful.
Yes, and you know, in today's day and age, the fieldwork period does not have to end. Just like the visitors of tourism does not have to end. We can all stay in touch by Zoom and other means. I appreciated the term activist anthropologist, activist folklorist. The idea is that by helping local people make a presentation to the general public, this helps put them on the map and helps them say, we exist, we have something to offer, we're important. And so it's a request that they receive government services and that the government do whatever it can to help that tribal or that community continue to exist. We all know that the value of real estate in forest areas and coastal areas is the most expensive. So the only way these people can continue their communities is with government support. So that museum, I like the term living museum. A living museum is a museum where the objects on display are still in everyday use, or versions of the objects on display are in everyday use. Members of the community explain the objects and demonstrate them to the visitors. Always one level of culture will be for public display for outsiders, and another level will be for community members. For example, a very important part of local insider culture is Sami with the tribal people, you know, going into spirit, in English it's called spirit possession. That maybe is not such a good idea when people are visiting, especially, you know, certain people might feel it's backward, it's not auspicious. So people, the members of the community have to have a discussion with the facilitator, folklorist or anthropologist to discuss what do we really want to show? What are we doing here? So that's all part of the process. The local people have to be in the role of taking a full partnership position financially and artistically. Okay, now I'm going to tell this story from the fishing community, which was told to me by a man who sadly is no more, but I'm going to tell you the story. Okay, this is this story I'm calling Marrying the Turtle Princess. Okay, again, leaving the analytical mode, going into the storytelling mode. Hundreds of years ago, beside what is now Marina Beach in Chennai, there was a fishing community, just like there's a fishing community there today. Today it's called Machikupam. I'm not sure what it was called 300-400 years ago, but 300 years ago there it was. And there was a young man who used to go out fishing with his father, and eventually his father got too old to go out. So the young man went by himself in a katumaram, which is 6 or 7 tree trunks strapped together. I'm afraid to say you won't find them anymore. because after the tsunami in 2004 or 5, most people converted to these large fiberglass boats. So actually what was lost was not only the Katumaram, but the rowing songs that people used to sing, elele, elesa, elele, elesa, which people cannot do with a motorized boat, because the sound of the motor is too loud. But unfortunately, we activists, folklorists are not in a position to say, no, don't use a boat with the engine. We don't want that. We want you to continue using a non-engine boat so we can hear the song. You know, we're not in a position to say that. Okay, anyway, this young man, he went fishing, he threw the net, and one night there was a big turtle that came back in the net. And the people don't like to kill turtles. They associate it with a incarnation of Vishnu, and they try to free turtles from the nets when they can. So the turtle said, "Please let me go. Please let me go. I am the king of the turtles." So the young man said, "Okay, don't worry," and pulled the turtle out of the net. And the turtle said, "Come with me. I am the king of the turtles. And I have a daughter who has been watching you, and she likes you. Come and meet her." So the young fishing man said, "But if I go in the water, I can't breathe." The turtle said, "Don't worry about that. I'll fix that." So the young man jumped in the water, held onto the turtle, and down, down, down they went. Down, down, down. Finally, they came to a city there at the bottom of the sea, which was so beautiful. All the buildings were made out of precious gems and stones. And the young man was really amazed. And they came to the palace of the turtle king, and there was the turtle princess, very beautiful. So long green hair, I was told. After some time, they decided to get married. And the years passed. They had 2 little children. And one day, the young man said to his wife, "You know, dear, I never said goodbye to my mother and father. I'd like to go back and just say goodbye to them, say hello and goodbye to them. Is it okay?" So she said, "All right, but here, take this little black box, carry it with you. Do not open it, no matter what. Promise me you won't open it." He said, "Okay, I won't open it." So up he went, swimming upward, 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 and came to the surface, and then he swam back towards the land, but everything was different. The buildings were much higher, and there were these contraptions on wheels that were moving around without horses. Cars. He'd never seen a car before. So he went to where his family house used to be, and it was all different. It was all a different type of house. He knocked on the door. He told his family name. They said, "We never heard of you. We never heard of your family. Go away." So you can imagine he was a little taken aback, and he figured out. He said, "Well, what is the date?" And he learned that 300 years had passed. So he went walking down on the beach, and he was so sad because that meant all of his family was gone, all of his old family. He sat down on the beach, and he remembered he still had that black box. Now, tell me, should he open that black box or not? No. But he had nothing else to do. He decided, "I'm just going to open this black box. What's the use?" He opened it, and there was a whoosh sound, and instantly he aged from being a young man. He was still a young man somehow, but he aged to an old man, and he died. That's the story. So I take that story as representing expressing a lot of anxiety about the changes that are happening in the community, and will people continue to have a place in the new community? You know, new buildings are being coming up, and there's the danger of the fishing community being displaced. So I take that. But the story element of having something that you're not supposed to open or look at, and you look at it anyway, that's in many grandmother stories around the world. That's very popular. And now I have to admit to you that I did something that as a folklorist we're not supposed to do. I made a different ending for the story because I felt it was just too sad. So my ending is he's sitting on the beach, and he's about to open the box, but his son and daughter come up walking out of the water. They're just little turtles. And they come up and they say, Appa, Appa, don't open that box. Come back. Mother wants you to come back with us. So he goes back with his children and goes back to his wife and lives happily there. Isn't that a better ending? us outside people often want a softer ending. But okay, any thoughts or responses to that story? Yes.
So it was very interesting that he comes back and he realizes that 300 years have passed. I've read similar stories, which are yogic stories from a collection called Tripura Rahasya, which are basically stories which intend to tell you how to teach you yoga. And in that also people go into these states of meditation and they come back after 300 years. But this is not a yogic story, so it was very interesting to hear about that story element.
Yeah, it's in many stories around the world. There's a famous USA short story where Rip Van Winkle is a story in the USA where someone sleeps for 20 years. So in summing up, I want to say that the environmental conditions, language, and culture, they're all intertwined. If you take tribal people away from the forest or fishing people away from the beach, whatever culture they have is going to evaporate. These are people who've lived sustainably in their natural environment for tens of thousands of years. But if you take them out of their environment, the culture and the language will evaporate. So what we activists finally see, our mission is to explain to the powers that be the value of linguistic, cultural, and diversity. It's pretty established now that biological diversity is healthy for an environment, but we have to also extend this to linguistic and cultural. And there's logistical problems with linguistic and cultural diversity. You can't communicate with everybody instantly by the same way. You have to use different languages and different methods. But when communicating with the powers that be, the district forest officers and the state and the national government, we have to try to convince them that there is a value to these indigenous traditions, not just to traditional knowledge, but to traditional communities. All right, I think I've covered most of the notes that I've had. Does anyone want to tell me or ask me anything before we finish?
So, Dr. Eric Miller, is this are all these stories also going to be a part of the living museum that you were talking about?
Well, the museum that is near Pechiparai with the Kani people, I should certainly hope that these stories will be told, that story would be told there. And also the 16 children's songs and games would be demonstrated there. I and team, actually, we organized a storytelling festival in Pechiparai 7 years ago. So hopefully that tradition can develop. Again, if the pandemic ever ends, and if the pandemic, to the degree that the pandemic does not end, let's start building to develop video conference communication. At the beach at Nachikupam, There's not a museum at the moment, but across the Adjar River, people are developing a music festival, which includes both traditional and Carnatic music. So that could be extended into a living museum. That's the beach just before Elliott's Beach in Besant Nagar.
Thank you.
People need to, for people to respect and develop their culture, they need to, in part, make a living from it. So, we cannot just give lip service that it's beautiful and it's important. We have to help them make some money from it in a positive way. And, there are many questions that come up. What does it mean to commodify something, to put a price tag on something? But it can be done. It can be done in a tasteful way. Okay, I pass the microphone on to somebody. Deepa, I'm passing the microphone on to you, Deepa.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Eric Miller. Would you also like to mention about your upcoming festival before you?
Oh, yes. We have 39 free workshops on 39 different aspects of storytelling, 39 90-minute workshops, totally free. To me, that's the highlight of this festival. It will happen during the month of February. Again, just Google World Storytelling Institute, and you'll find out how to register for the festival. Thank you, Deepa.
Thank you. That was a wonderful exposition, and glad you could make it. I'm really delighted once again that the conference is bringing together academicians and storyteller practitioners. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you, Shiv Kumarji.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eric. And it was like Deepaji said, hearing storytellers, practitioners on the ground, engaged with communities, it's always insightful.